Hey folks, I wanted to let you know my analysis of what's taking place with the talks on the Korean Peninsula. There's a lot of confusion in the media. It seems pretty clear, however, that there is a big division among the rich and powerful people who run the United States over how to proceed when it comes to North Korea. One of the most outspoken advocates of these talks that are taking place is Jim Rogers. Now, Jim Rogers is a very wealthy investor. He lives in Singapore. He's U.S. born, and he is very outspoken in South Korean television. He was on Fox News, just urging the USA to restore relations with North Korea. But his rival, somebody he was in business with at one point, who he had a falling out with, George Soros, has a very different perspective. Now, it seems that Jim Rogers, he's a libertarian. He says that he's the closest to Austrian school economics, Ludwig von Mises. He's in with the Ron Paul crowd, hangs out with Republicans and libertarians. But he thinks that investing in North Korea would be very good for the United States in the short term, that a lot of money could be made. And in fact, he's highlighted the fact that a lot of the people in North Korea are very well educated, that the population, there's no illiteracy, there's a lot of engineers there, a lot of scientists, a lot of people with a lot of technical knowledge that they've gained through the government and the educational system the Korean Workers' Party has built. And basically, he's hoping that by fitting North Korea in with the economic boom that's going on Russia's Far East, with China's One Belt, One Road initiative, with building the Trans-Asian Highway or the Iron Silk Road that begins in South Korea and goes through North Korea into Russia and China and all the way connecting them with Western Europe, that a lot of money can be made. And a lot of lower-level capitalists in the USA feel that way. They feel that they could make a lot of money in the short term. However, if you listened to George Soros, Jim Rogers' longtime rival, George Soros, when he was speaking in Davos, spoke about how he considers the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party to be the greatest threat. And he's spoken out against them. And there's a real fear on the part of certain forces, I think, grouped around the intelligence agencies. They have a real fear that if North Korea is able to have a kind of Deng Xiaoping moment, like during the 1980s in China, if the Korean Workers' Party is able to bring in a huge amount of foreign investment, if they're able to vastly raise the living standards, that the result will be the Korean Workers' Party getting stronger. And they fear the consequences of that, because the Korean Workers' Party is an anti-imperialist, socialist, revolutionary, party. And they fear that giving North Korea an economic boom won't result in bringing capitalism and free markets, and that's what Milton Friedman predicted, right? That market reforms naturally lead to democracy and capitalism in the Western system. That Milton Friedman, what happened in China during the 1980s, basically proved that Milton Friedman was wrong. That China was able to have a private sector, but it ultimately didn't result in the overthrow of the Chinese Communist Party and the establishment of the Western system and the restoration of capitalism. It simply made the Chinese Communist Party and socialism in China stronger. It was the opposite of what had happened in Eastern Europe. All the Eastern European countries in the late 80s were having market reforms and privatizing things, and then Soros and others were able to manipulate that into a political crisis and overthrow eventually the Soviet Union and Poland and Czechoslovakia and Romania and all these different countries. The market reforms ultimately toppled the Marxist-Leninist governments of Eastern Europe, but China was able to use the market reforms to actually strengthen their socialism. And there's a strong feeling among the intelligence agencies in the United States that North Korea will be able to do the same thing, that they'll be able to use the market reforms to actually ultimately strengthen their socialist economic system and its socialist foundations. However, Jim Rogers and others say, hey, if they want to have socialism in North Korea, that's not our business, but we ought to trade with them, we ought to do business with them. That's a way to bring peace. So that's the division that exists over North Korea and how to proceed. And the fact that we see this attack on the North Korean embassy in Spain, the fact that the Hanoi summit with Trump and the second meeting after their first meeting that was in Singapore, where Jim Rogers is based, their second summit, which was in Hanoi, that it completely flopped, talk that the talks may be off. That's what this is about. There is a fight within the deep state and within the American ruling class about, do we want to make money in the short term by having North Korea disarm and have it economically boom? Or do we want to not take the risk of strengthening the ideology of the Korean Workers' Party and the socialist economic foundations of North Korea? So that's really what's going on here. And George Soros, folks like that think in the long-term interest of Western capitalism. These guys are ideological liberals. They want to bring free markets to the entire world. They're thinking in the long-term interest of the capitalist system. Whereas Jim Rogers, guys like that, just want to make money. So that's really the difference that you can see. And that's the divide when it comes to Korea.